Hello, Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, Keith. Good to see
Good
you again.
afternoon. Yes, it's always good to see you. As we usually say, another week gone.
Right, right. I know
Yeah.
I look forward to these BizTalk Weekly calls though, because
Uh,
it breaks up my day, and we always have a lot to talk about in our 30 minutes that we get together.
yeah, we've been going a little long lately. I was looking at the recordings and we went 37 last week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're really stretching it. Uh, so I was thinking about something before we got on, because we never really know what we're going to talk about until we get online. But the thing that I'm fascinated with is what's called corporate culture. You
Sure.
know, and that seems to be a big topic in corporate America, and especially around people that are of our children's age, that I would say in the late 20s to, early 40s,
Yeah,
where they're looking for something different than you and I looked for when we were just starting out in business. I don't think the
yeah.
term corporate culture existed. At least, I don't, again, I shouldn't say that maybe the people that were our age then may have had some thoughts, but I don't think so.
Well, I think it existed. I think corporate culture has always existed. I just don't think it was something that people within and employees talked about. I don't think it was this kind of, it wasn't out there. It existed, but kind of in a, in sort of a situation where it was there, but it wasn't brought up a lot. It wasn't exposed. It wasn't talked about a lot. You kind of went about and did your job. And yeah, I think most large companies especially still had their vision and their goals, but today this is clearly a hot topic, as you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to get some thoughts out here and see what we come up with when we address this issue.
Yeah, so I again, obviously we can only reach back to our own experiences, but I think about even our parents. I mean, my father was never, and he was always an employee. He was a salesman like myself. Worked in the garment center, and he had a job. I mean, and there was no real moving around, you know, um, in terms of, like I'm unhappy, I want to move to a different job. The only time I mean, it's unfortunate, my father, when, and I think I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I was a teenager when he died, but he was losing his job. His company that he was working for was closing their U.S. operations. They were a Swiss-based um, company,
You see.
but he was not. He wouldn't have been looking for another job. He had a
Mhm.
job, and he hoped to get raises and grow. But we were a typical middle class family. Um, I think that the whole corporate environment was very different than it is today.
Sure. No doubt about that. I would share the same experience. Although my dad did move around quite a bit. He worked in the traffic and purchasing departments for paper mills throughout kind of the Midwest. And he and uh, my mom and our family moved around quite a bit. Now I was the youngest, and by the time I came along, I think they were tired of moving, so we kind of planted roots in Wisconsin. But before that, they moved a half a dozen times. So but still, you're right about one thing, and that is that uh, corporate culture has definitely changed since that time. It's changed since you and I entered the workforce. I see a lot of differences today as opposed to when I first started right out of college.
And I've spoken to both my sons about this, that there's more of a focus on culture than there is even the money. Not that money's not important, but it's like, if they don't like the environment, they're more apt to move and try to get something new as opposed to hang in there. There's no hanging in there anymore. It's like, you don't see where they're staying at a job for, 10, 15, 20 years. Well, my kids aren't old enough to be in the workforce that long, but yeah, I think there's more of a desire to like, okay, I don't like what this company stands for, and that's one of my businesses revolved around, nonprofit fundraising, not just in the nonprofit sector, but even for what's called corporate social responsibility, where companies are really focused on their brand being associated with doing good.
Yeah.
And I think that the younger generation that's, out there job hunting, and there's statistics to back this up, because again, having been in that space, I needed to study that, where the importance of what a company stands for is one of the things that's really important as people look to either get into the workforce, or to actually grow. They want to see what that company's all about.
What's interesting about it, Keith, is you wonder how much of that is driven by the company itself and how much of that is driven by consumers. Because there's no doubt that consumers today buy a lot differently than they used to. They look at things like, what's this company doing for the environment, for sustainability, for how they treat their employees. You look at companies who have offshore activities, businesses, right? And you get a lot of consumers looking to see, well, how do they treat their employees in China and India and Mexico? Is it a sweatshop, or do they treat their employees well? Where do they buy their coffee beans from, right? If they're a coffee bean manufacturer, you see so many companies now making that part of their marketing strategy, part of their brand, which we talked about last week. Because some people buy on that reason alone.
Yeah. And especially younger people. I mean,
Yes.
and the reason corporate social responsibility has become so big is not so much, I'm really cynical here, but not so much because the company really cares about, doing good, but they study what the consumer wants. And if the consumer wants you to have your brand be associated with good causes, you better get in line, because otherwise you start losing to the competitors that have paid attention to that.
I think there's probably two schools of thought there, Keith, because I think you're right. There are companies who are saying, I don't know that I really believe this, but I know that it's important to my customers, so I'm gonna adapt. And then I think you do have business owners, especially younger business owners today, who are, as you said just a few minutes ago, they're starting their own business because they want to do good.
Yeah.
Not because they want to make money. Now, that's always a nice thing to do, and you need to make some money to stay in business. But you see a lot more, I think, of business ownership built around doing good, doing what's right, giving back to a community, as opposed to just chasing dollars and cents.
Yeah, I think the term is doing well by doing good.
Yeah.
And yes, I would say that this generation of entrepreneurs are definitely focused on not just the dollars and cents. They're focused on what their dollars and cents can mean to, if they're a local business, mean to their own communities, fulfilling needs within the community. Because, when I opened up my first eyeglass store in Long Island, I became an integral part of the community.
Yeah,
I sponsored the Little League team. I
right.
gave donations to different organizations. I mean, all those things that you do in a local community. Now, I wasn't necessarily doing it with the thought of like, you know, corporate social responsibility, which is again a label that it falls under now. I was doing it for business purposes. I mean, to be frank, it was like, well, yeah, I want to be viewed in the community as somebody that cares,
Sure. Yeah.
but it wasn't like, I wasn't driven by that. I was driven by the dollar. I need to feed my family.
I think what's interesting about what you just said, Keith, and compare that to what we were just talking about with new business owners. You were looking at it through the eyes of how this can help my business, and you took action. Where today, I think we see a lot of business owners looking at what's the good I can do for the community, and the business aspect kind of comes along as almost a secondary initiative as opposed to the primary.
I think the priorities have changed.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting that thought process down by any means.
No.
Because, I believe you should want to do good because it's not just good for your business, okay, and how the community or the world views you. It's good for your soul. I mean, it does feel good. And I didn't think that way when I was in my 30s.
Right.
I'm in my 60s now. So I do believe that there is something that's spiritually good about giving back and
Yeah.
helping others.
I think where I saw this really get started was really through the, kind of the environmentalism issue that's kind of growing here over the last 20 years or so. And I think, again, it's making sure that, me as a business owner, you're taking that into account, but you're also doing it because there is business value in doing that. And let's say it's things like conserving, right? Or reusing of the things you use in your business, right? It's just, we used to just throw everything in the garbage, right? Now, I think as a business owner, there's businesses out there that are solely focused on repurposing some kind of existing material, right? They'll take an existing something that's already been made, and they'll turn it into something else, and that's their business value. That's how that's their value proposition is. We take product that's already been made and we repurpose it as opposed to throwing it out.
Right. Which of course throwing things out it winds up in a landfill. There's pollution involved, there's environmental issues, which, it's again, and you don't want to get into the whole politics of it, but again, using something, there's some people that want to really do good and they really believe in their mission. And there are people that just say, you know what, this will make me money. Okay.
Right.
Big market.
Right.
And where is that line? Or does there even need to be a line that's drawn? Does it really matter if you're doing good? Does it matter whether you're doing good because it makes you money, or you're doing good because you just want to do good?
Right. And I think all of us would like to believe we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. But again, if we're running a business and we're not turning a profit, we're not going to be in business for very long. So we've got to be able to balance those two issues. And I think what I'm hearing you say especially is that, one supports the other. Now, maybe in the past, again, the dollars and cents were in the lead. Now maybe corporate sustainability, corporate culture is more in the lead, but both those things have got to come alongside each other and coexist.
No question. It's when you look at businesses that you can walk into a business and do or experience a business where that they are certainly behind the times in how they present themselves, even in an online environment. you go to a website, you can tell that, I use the joke, I said, that website looks like it's from 1990, it's like, but there are people that get very stuck in their ways. They've been doing it for too long. They become lazy. They become like demotivated. And it's like they're ready to end their career as opposed to just starting their career.
Sure, they're not staying up on kind of the current environment that they work in.
Right, right. They lose the sense of purpose. And I think one of the things that's good about the doing good, even if it's equal to, okay, the doing well, which whatever the balance is, one's a little higher, the doing good can keep you in the game mentally, because your purpose is no longer just about, well, I'm making money, I'm paying the bills, so that's good. And look, let's face it, it's very easy to get selfish and not really care about anything but the mighty dollar,
Right.
And that's where people think a different way. It's like, oh, you're nothing more than just a well, there's so many different terms people use to basically knock people who are interested in making money.
Keith, I worked for a gentleman back in the late 90s. So this would have been before, the real corporate culture domination came into effect. And he always talked about as running a business of kind of having 4 pillars, and considering all of those pillars when you're making a decision. And those pillars were, the shareholder or the owner, the employees, the community in which you lived and worked in, and then finally the environment. And at the time, he really meant environment sort of in the environment we were working in, right? What was the environment like that we were working in? But I think today you would say that as truly the environment. Like, are we being good to the world we live in, or are we creating a lot of waste? Are we creating a lot of excess? Are we creating a lot of pollution, or are we not being socially responsible to the environment that we live in?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Use the word environment, where environment could mean the room that you're doing business in, your office, your store, whatever it is. And the word environment is now it's about carbon emissions and landfill pollution and but I kind of laugh a lot, because the people who scream about environmental issues are the same people that are taking private jets
Yeah.
all over the world, and adding to
There's no doubt there's some hypocrisy from some people.
yeah,
Yes.
there's I would say there's a lot of hypocrisy.
But I think, Keith, you brought this topic up today, and I think it's really important for business owners to, regardless of how they feel about it, regardless of whether they say, I started my business because I did want to do good, or no, I started my business because, you know what, I have a family to support, and I felt like this is the best way I could do it. Irregardless of why, you need to take this into consideration as you're running your business, because it's real. And there's no doubt that consumers today have a lot of power and a lot of influence due to the social media and the internet, and the ability to share their experiences that they've had with businesses. That if you're not being socially responsible, it's going to find its way into your reviews. It's going to find its way into referrals or lack of referrals. And all of a sudden you're going to be wondering, why aren't people buying my product? Why aren't they using my service? this is a real thing that business owners need to be cognizant of and not shove it under the rug.
Yeah, well, in today's you know, fully open world, you can't hide. Someone hiding, you know, if you're selling a product that happens to be made of a substance that um doesn't, what's the word? I was gonna say biodegradable, but you know, something that it doesn't disintegrate, you know, it basically stays. It's,
Right.
you know, and then it winds up in the land and in the ground water, and it's, you know, these environmental issues. Your competitors are going to point that out because invariably some young guy or girl, I should say man or woman, gotta be careful, will start a business and point out the fact that we have replaced what you're using right now with a product, okay, that's made from a certain, you know, whether it's a certain type of, it could be plant-based, it could be something that you know is going to be healthier. It's not, it won't poison anybody. I mean, there's so much more science and information out there that it's important to pay attention to it. Question,
Absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
question is though, when does it become more important than the business itself in terms of profit? That's where, you know, sometimes people get so wrapped up in their mission that they forget that they still have to, you know, pay the bills.
Yeah, yeah, you still need to keep an eye on the bottom line, because as we said a few minutes ago, if you're not, and your business isn't generating a profit, you won't be in business for very long. So if you got into business because you wanted to do good, but you're not making money, you know, unless you have infinite amount of money in your bank account, or you have rich friends or family, you're going to be out of business. And then the whole reason you got into business, to do good, you're not going to be able to do. But I think you're right. You said that. My background is manufacturing, right? And I think of over the years how the inputs into the manufacturing process have changed so much in terms of, you know, we used to just look for a product that worked, right? We didn't care whether it had an impact on the employees who were breathing it, or, you know, that we were somehow not disposing of it correctly. Now, today, you need to be so cognizant of, are the products I'm using, the inputs I'm using, are they friendly to the environment? Am I using a paint that's, you know, eco-friendly? Or is it something that's, you know, the old lead-based paint, right? That
Yeah.
Today nobody would buy something that was painted with a lead-based paint, right? So I mean, those are the kind of considerations I think we were talking about just a few minutes ago, that as a business owner, you better know where your inputs are coming from. You better know not only your own business, but you better know your suppliers and where they're getting materials from, because that's impacting you as a business owner. And again, as we just said a few minutes ago, with the way social media works today and the internet, the connectivity and the transparency, somebody's going to point that out if you're not doing things appropriately for the environment.
Yeah, so it's again, it's a balancing act for business owners, especially those who are older. And I'm not even talking about people that are our age. I'm talking people that are in the middle of their careers. You know, they're in their mid to late 40s, early 50s, and they still got, you know, 10 to 15 years ahead of them.
Right.
And they've been stuck in their ways of doing things. And you got to be on top of your game all the time. It's not just, you know, you start a business, you've been successful. You can't sit on your laurels and say, I'm good. I've been there, I've done that. You know, you always have to be looking to renew yourself, you know, and see what is the trends in my industry. You know, am I buying products that are not deemed environmentally safe? Am I selling products, you know, that are not deemed environmentally safe? So it's certainly part of the equation. And I think it's going to get even a bigger part as, you know, older folks retire, you know, and younger kids come into the, you know, the workplace. They're not going to want to either work for a company that doesn't, you know, really have a good corporate social responsibility program, that doesn't sell products that are environmentally safe. You know, there's enough harm in the world without adding to that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, Keith, what I heard you say there was, I think as business owners, sometimes we think, hey, we're gonna dig our feet in and we're gonna be the ones that make decisions based on what we believe and what we think. Uh, and you can do that as a business owner because it is your business, but it's also very risky because, as we just said, consumers, buyers have a way of deciding for themselves who they're going to buy from, and sometimes maybe they're not going to buy from the best quality or the best priced supplier. They're going to buy from the one who's more socially responsible. And I think we talked about it with consumers, but we're seeing it even in, you know, in large companies in their purchasing departments, right? They
yeah,
all have these sustainability goals that they have to achieve and that they're being measured on.
yeah, and as I said, it's going to get even more prevalent as younger generations, you know,
Yes.
because they're going to start, they're the future creators. Okay. You know, when you come up with an idea and uh, you know, put pen to paper, you plan it, then you manufacture it. There, it's not just, oh, we're going to manufacture, you know, this product, and it's, you know, they have to think about, all right, now when that product, you know, it comes to end of life, okay, and then someone's, you know, I'll use, you know, Apple with iPhones, they're constantly pushing a new version, okay, and all these phones now, a good deal of them wind up in the secondary market, so they continue to be refurbished and resold. But there's a certain point where it's no longer supported by the company. And what's going to happen to those? You know, all these things are made up of, you know, different types of, you know, technology boards and plastics and things that. How are you going to dispose of that in the environmentally safe?
Yeah, in a friendly way to the environment, right?
Yeah, so it's not, again, not causing harm. So it's funny
As
we
you
start.
were saying that, Keith, what was going through my mind was the changes that have taken place in packaging of products. Right? I remember when we were kids and we'd buy something and you know, everything would go in the trash, right? All
Yeah,
the packaging materials,
everything,
everything, right?
everything.
Today, I mean, today, everything, it seems like that is part of the packaging and the shipping process can all be recycled, can all be reused. Right? I know it's funny, I'll get boxes from Amazon and that get mailed to me, and I'm sure that box has been used at least
Oh,
2 or 3 times.
at
You can just
least,
tell by the condition of it that this is not a brand new box. This was shipped in an existing box, and that never used to happen
yeah,
when you and
yeah,
I were
they were
younger.
just, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
now, of course, there's cost savings to the company as well. Uh, but I remember, you know, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and we had landfills right near us, you know, and I remember you see everything, mattresses and tires, and you know, everything you could think of wound up in a landfill. But today, you know, they again, you know, why did they start, giving you, a nickel a bottle of water bottles. Why?
Right.
Because they want to recycle it.
Right.
Almost everything's recyclable these days,
Yeah.
and of course that's good for the environment.
I think another point you just touched on that's really key is that, we were talking a little bit about the profitability of a company versus the eco-friendliness of the company. I don't think those two things are necessarily mutually exclusive. As you just said, there's things you can do that you're doing right by the environment that can save you money, right?
Yeah.
If you can reuse, recycle, if you can take the scrap, whatever it is, out of your business, you're saving money. You're doing right by the environment, and you're also doing right by the business. It doesn't have to be an either or.
Yeah, I mean, there are companies that they just sell recycled products.
Yeah, we were talking about that just a minute ago, right?
It's just a business into itself.
Yeah.
So, it's funny, we started this whole conversation about corporate culture, and, it leaned towards the environment because that's part of corporate culture. The
Right.
corporate culture is, what does the company stand for? Okay. What are they doing that's good for the world? It's not just that you're selling a product. You're getting dark on me there. I don't know why.
Yeah, I see that. My camera's been acting up a little bit.
Good now.
Right?
You're good now. Take two.
Pat.
So we'll have to recycle that camera.
I'll just throw it away.
Yeah, so they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both, and
Right.
that's a mindset too. That starts with the top.
Yeah.
How the company thinks, and remember, they're also thinking about the bottom line because they have to hire people.
Yes,
And
they do.
if you want to hire the best people, if you don't have the type of corporate culture that people want to participate in, you're not going to get the best people.
Right.
And that's where, that you talk about a domino effect of that affects, if you're a manufacturer, the quality of the product, maybe there's more mistakes, customer service is poor, which eventually is going to affect your bottom line.
Yes. Yes. Keith, it's funny you mentioned, because we started this conversation, as you said, with corporate culture. We could have gone down a lot of avenues with regard to corporate culture. We chose to talk about the sustainability, the environmental side, but we could have talked about employee relations, the corporate culture there. We touched on a little bit about how corporate culture and business performance kind of interact with each other. But there's a lot of different, kind of subtopics you can go down when you start talking about corporate culture. Certainly, there's some things we could talk about. They get very controversial. I don't know if we want to address those in a future
No, I think we'll stay away
session,
from
or if we'll
that.
just stay away from those.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. But, listen, we live.
I know one thing we don't want to talk about is religion and politics in our.
That's we'll definitely stay away from that. All you do is get in trouble there because half the population is going to disagree with you anyway. So why
Right.
go there? Let's stay neutral.
Right.
So okay,
Well, just there's a place to have those discussions, and there's a place not to have those discussions. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
and we want to stay focused on business talk and really focusing on those business owners out there who have those day-to-day challenges of running a business and all these things we've talked about over the last 6 or 8 weeks that they need to be concerned about and need to make sure that they're in tune with.
Yeah, it's funny, you think about who in our audience is going to care about this topic. Now, certainly younger people who are listening are going to be all over this. Yes, yes, yes. And you can have people who are, older, set in their ways, saying, I'm too old for that. Who cares? I'm not retiring in 5 years, so but again, it comes down to, I think it says a lot about who you are as a person. I mean, if you're someone who always cares, you just care. And if you didn't understand what's going on in the environment, okay, that's okay. You just didn't.
Yeah,
But if you cared and you learn about it, you got to start to think about how can I incorporate better practices into my business so I am delivering products that are considered to be environmentally safe. I mean, I think about children more than anything because
yeah.
the whole lead problem, with kids were getting lead poisoning.
When we grew up, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and this came from, the crib was painted with something that had lead in it, or the
Right.
walls, or the furniture, So nobody knew about stuff like that. I mean, look, I grew up, we didn't have seatbelts in our cars.
Right.
That didn't become required until the 70s.
Right.
But you say, how were there fewer deaths? Well, part of the reason for that was cars were made like tanks. It's like, if a car got hit, it's like, it wasn't, today it gets like, it's like crushed. Back then, it's like, you just bounce off it. I mean,
Right. Everyone was driving these big Buicks and Oldsmobiles back then. So
we're really dating ourselves here.
Keith, I know we got to wrap up here, but just I think there was one thing you made a comment on. I think was really important, and that was that let's say you are an older business owner, and like you just said, you kind of feel like, oh, this is not something I want to have to worry about. I'm going to be selling my business in the next few years or handing it off to a family member or whatever the case. I think it's still really important for a business owner to realize that a prospective owner is going to come in and they're going to evaluate my business. If it's somebody that we've talked about here over the last 30 minutes, a younger buyer of a business, they're going to absolutely ask about your sustainability policy. They're going to ask where you're sourcing your inputs from. They're going to ask these kind of questions because they want to know that they're buying a company that is, interested in being a sustainable company. And if you're not, and you're trying to sell your business, they're going to devalue your business because of that. So even if you are in that situation where you're saying, I don't really want to deal with this, I think you almost have to, unless you really are wanting to just leave money on the table or sell your business for less than what you could get for it. And if you're handing it off to, a son or a daughter, boy, I think you want to hand off a company that's in as good a shape as possible when you do that. So I'd really encourage business owners not to kind of stick their head in the sand when it comes to this, but really think about it and understand how it's impacting your business specifically.
That's a great point, Greg. I really appreciate that. And this was an interesting conversation, a little different than our normal conversations, but I think it's still important. And
Absolutely.
We'll say goodbye for this week and sign off.
Thanks, Keith. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you. Same here. I will see everyone next week.
Bye-bye.